The stars are bright, we own the night. The stars are bright, we own. The stars are bright, we own the night. The stars are bright, we own. The stars. The stars.
Hello, everyone. So this evening, I have the pleasure of speaking to Amanda McKinlay. Today, we're going to talk about fibromyalgia. Happy Friday, everyone. Okay, let's start with that. Welcome to another episode of No Better Time Than the Present. I'm very excited about this evening. We're going to speak to Amanda McKinlay about her advocacy in fibromyalgia. I wanted to give a brief explanation of what fibromyalgia is because some of the symptoms is similar to some, I guess, side effects that many people with multiple myeloma experience. So, based on the Johns Hopkins medicine, fibromyalgia is a condition that causes pain in muscles and soft tissues all over the body. It is an ongoing chronic condition. It can affect the neck, shoulder, back, chest, hips, and buttocks, arms, and legs. The pain may be worse in the morning and evening. Sometimes the pain could last all day. So, it's funny because a lot of these conditions that are out there seem similar in terms of the side effect and the symptoms that go along with it. So it'll be interesting this evening to hear a little bit about Amanda's journey and all of that. Okay, so as I said before, there are some similarities in pain, similar to multiple myeloma. Okay, but the two are different. Okay, so we all know about fatigue, that's a symptom, brain fog, that's a symptom, as well as muscle aches and pain. Okay, so, okay, Amanda, let's see if this works the way we need it to work. Hopefully we don't have issues with.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So I know it's very, very late on your end. Okay, it's very late. So for those coming on, Amanda is having this conversation with me this evening from the UK. So it's like 12 o'clock or so on her end. So we're going to get to the point of where we need to get to because it's late. Okay, it's Betty by time. Okay, so I gave like a small I guess intro in terms of what fibromyalgia is. So let's see. First off, welcome. Welcome. It's good to have this conversation with you. I hope you had a beautiful day. Okay, and evening. Now that it's going on to the next day. Tell me a little bit about your journey, and then we'll just go with the conversation from there. Like you said you were diagnosed in 2009.
Yeah.
So tell me what that experience was about.
So at that point, I had been working in an elderly care facility as a care assistant, so lots of lifting and laying, running about, heavy going work. So at first, when the pains and things kicked in, I thought it's just the job, you know. The fatigue had been an issue for me previously, having been diagnosed with chronic fatigue when I was younger. So there were certain things that I put down to just life or the job, but then it became more and more of a problem over a period of a couple of years. So back and forward to the general practitioner, as we call it over here, and started kind of comparing symptoms to friends who I knew had the condition, you know, that, okay, well, I've got that and I've got that, and thinking, you know, so eventually it got to a stage with my GP where I thought I knew what I had, he thought he knew what I had. I was referred to a specialist, rheumatologist, poked and prodded for a little bit and got the diagnosis. Now, that, as I say, that was a 2-year period. That's incredibly quick.
Right. It doesn't seem so, sorry to cut you in, because 2 years is a long time to be diagnosed.
Mhm.
I get what you're saying, that it is quick,
Yeah, it's
you know, but yeah.
the nature of the condition, because there is so, you know, there's no scans, there's no blood tests, you know, it doesn't show up in x-rays, so it's difficult to diagnose. So 2 years is actually incredibly short. There are people who are 5-10 years back and forward to various GPs and various, you know, to get a diagnosis. So I was, although 2 years sounds a long time, because of the nature of the condition, it's actually, that would be the exception rather than the rule.
Okay. So that's interesting, because based on the symptoms that I had said earlier, I feel like a lot of people may be walking around with it and don't realize that they have it. As I said, it's some similarities to multiple myeloma. It is a difference, but I guess in terms of the side effects or the symptoms, you know, some of the things seem kind of similar. So, has your condition been debilitating, and how so?
Yeah, I will say it is not as debilitating now. In the early days, as anyone with any condition, you go through a period of grieving, you know, for what you lose. I mentioned working in elderly care, that went, you know, different things because of the pain, the fatigue, all the things you mentioned, the brain fog, you know, those are not conducive with being supportive for people that are in need of care. It actually got to the stage where some of the lovely elderly residents were helping me out.
Oh, wow.
And that was the point when I went, no, time to be leaving that. Had a difficult couple of years after that, and then I would various medications, you know, right the way through to opiate medication, and still having pain. So I think this would be about 6 or 7 years into the process. And I had a moment of, if this is me for the rest of my life, there has to be another way to do this. Back to my general practitioner, and I asked to be referred to a place in Glasgow called the NHS Centre for Integrative Care. Again, an absolute godsend in the UK that we have the National Health Service. You know, so was referred there, and it is, as the name suggests, it's an integrative care system there. It's you know, they look at the whole picture, you know, and kind of treat you very much as an individual person and look at what you need and what services and things they offer are the best to help you manage and help you, to be honest, in the early days, accept that the condition was there. I had been in such denial and pushing through and, you know, trying to fight against it. But through the support and the things I learned there, I was able to start living with it, if that makes sense.
It does.
You know, so yeah, so there's that, very much that thing of, that was the starting of learning to different tools and looking at how my mindset and certain things I was doing were feeding the condition.
Okay.
You know, so, and that's kind of, so I've now been, what was about 8 years, yeah, that'd be about right, 8 years of managing it completely holistically, no medication whatsoever.
Wow. So give me 2 examples of what you do without the meds, like management.
Biggest things for me, I love meditation and mindfulness,
Okay.
which is so funny because at first, one of the very first things they taught us at the centre was a practice called a body scan.
Okay.
So yeah, it's like John Kabat-Zinn mindfulness based stuff. And of course, here's me looking for ways to not notice I'm in pain, you know, and to be free of this pain and have it gone. And the doctor's asking me to go through my body and check out how I'm feeling. It's like, I know how I'm feeling. Sore. I want it gone. Don't need to be checking in.
Exactly. Exactly.
But it was explained, you know, yeah, but why is it there? You know, are you stressed? Have you been overdoing it? You know, it's basically, they explained as having learning to have a conversation with your body. You know, so it's okay, yeah, so if you're mentioning your lovely introduction about, you know, the pain in the shoulders and pain in various places. And okay, so, you know, are my shoulders sore because I've been sitting stressed and hunched up? You know, were the bags up, was my handbag too heavy? You know, so it gave you it kind of put in place, you know, you could go, okay, that's there. Why is that there? Can I do something about it? You know, what is my body needing in that moment? You know, so I found the mindfulness aspect really, really helpful. And the other thing that's huge for me, separate from there, is creativity. I love to draw, to colour, to create. Sometimes it's for expression, sometimes it's as a distraction. You know, it's a shift of focus away from the condition and what's going on with it. It's just a take myself away from it.
I love it. Like, I can relate to the mindfulness sessions that you've done, because I know I've done that in the past, but not necessarily for my condition. I did that because of the job that I had. Okay. And I was highly stressed. And that was something I felt I needed to do before something got hurt. Okay. So I needed to resume and, you know, focus on the body. So it's funny that you said the body scan. Like, I remember the woman who gave the session, that was her thing, to just scan your body. And I think a lot of us, we take for granted how powerful our body is and how powerful our mind is. Now, obviously, you may still have, you know, be uncomfortable. You may still have pain, but it's like mind over matter, as to really zone in and try to connect all of these entities, if you will, to try to limit the amount of distress that you may be in.
I mean, it was even that thing of just the simple thing back then of acceptance. As I say, I spent so much time fighting against it. It's wasting basically so much energy, pushing and pushing and pushing. Whereas accept it, you know, and wanting the pain to be gone. Whereas having that moment of acceptance of, do you know what? This is a chronic pain condition. Therefore, there will be a level of pain every day. You know, I might not like that, but my liking it or disliking it doesn't change the fact that it's there.
Exactly.
You know, so it's that thing of, okay, it's there. How can I make friends with it? What, you know, what can what can I do? What can I give it to, you know, be able to kind of have a better life?
I totally get it. Now, how did you get into advocating about fibromyalgia? And how important is it in educating the public?
I think for me, because I have been in the word, you know, I use the word so often when I'm telling my story, fortunate, you know, as I said, 2 years to be diagnosed, that was fortunate. Having a really good general practitioner is fortunate. It's still, you know, it's not a new condition. You know, it's been around in one form or another for many, many years. They actually believe that Florence Nightingale,
Oh,
when she came back from the Crimean War, she had a condition that, if it had been nowadays, would have been fibromyalgia. Frida Kahlo, the artist,
okay.
they believe that her pain condition may have been fibromyalgia. So this is not a new thing. And now brain fog's kicked in and I've forgotten where I was going with that. Yeah, advocacy. I knew there was a point to that.
No worries.
Yeah. So, as I say, just for me, as I say, I was fortunate. I had support from, you know, I had a good GP. I was able to access the things I needed to help me live a good life. It's not the way it is for everyone. You know, as I say, I had friends and family who were there for me. Not everyone has that. So for me, the raising the awareness, the reaching out, the telling my story whenever I can, to get those people that don't have what I had, you know, and for the people that, you know, need to be educated, that need to be informed, so that other people can, you know, I mean, I'm not sure the statistics in the US. I think it's about 3% of the population in the US, I think. And I know in the UK it's about 1 in 20 people with fibromyalgia. So I think, yeah, I'm sure it's about 3 or 4% in the US with it. But still, you know, so it's not, you know, it's not a massive condition, but it's still, there are enough people out there that understanding should be growing.
I'm sorry, as you're speaking, I looked up quick. So it seems like it affects 2% of the US population.
I was a little bit off there with that, but I knew it was I knew it wasn't any higher than 5, so we're at least for this time of night, my statistics aren't too bad. I'm used to working in UK, not US statistics. So
of course. So, okay. Clearly, you have a very excellent team. Okay. So I was going to say, how does your team help you manage your condition?
to be honest, on a day-to-day basis, it's really down to me, you know, to be sticking to dipping into my toolbox, saying no when I need to say no. You know, that was a big one for me, because before, back in the day, I was a chronic people pleaser. You know, now I have remembered that I am people too. you know, and I can please me too sometimes. So for me, it is just about having the boundaries, knowing what I need, you know, taking it day by day, but also planning and kind of making sure, you know, I can do as much as I want to be able to do. You know, like for example, today it's now what, midnight almost here. I was out at a business networking thing 8:30 this morning, so I've been on the go for 10, 12, quite a few hours now.
All day.
Yeah.
Basically.
But I knew that was coming up, you know, so it's like, okay, so I'll do that and I'll do that. Ridiculously, I'm also going to a concert tomorrow.
Right.
So, but for me, it's a case of if I manage and keep things on an even keel, I can do, and then schedule things around the other, the other stuff, but just make sure it's not all full on. Like, I had that work thing this morning, speaking to you now, but in between that, I've been spending time with family. I've just been sitting, taking it easy. I've not been overdoing it. So for me, it's balance, which is, I think, is the case with whether you have a condition or not. Everyone needs that balance in their life, I think.
I agree. I think there's no cut and dry answer how you cope and how you manage, because everyone does things a little differently. And so you have to find your aura, if that makes sense. You have to gear into what is it that makes you happy, what is it that you want to do, and just find that balance to put it all together. Unfortunately, our doctors are not going to give you that script. You really have to figure it out. And but we get in that limbo because we do expect these entities, I know I'm using that word a lot, to give us the answer, but sometimes that's not how it works. You have to figure it out.
Yeah.
So in terms of your advocacy, I know you've done a lot of work speaking out. What did you find was missing in terms of, I guess, people knowing about the condition, if that makes sense?
I think for me, one of the really important things why I speak out, especially in sharing how I have been able to manage the condition, is hope. Because it's so, I'm sure with myeloma, with anything, there's that fear in the early days. And I went through so much fear, so much loss, going back to what I would, the whole, what would you tell your younger self? There is so much that I would love to go back and say to the Amanda of 15, 16 years ago. But similarly, that Amanda had to go through the experiences that I've gone through to get to me being here. So it's that thing of like, but just to do that thing, do you know what? This is going to suck. There are times when this is going to be so hard, but it will be okay. There's a way through this. And for me, that's the biggest thing with the advocacy. Yeah, educate the doctors, educate, caregivers and whatever. But for me, it's more about people with the condition and just saying, look, it can be okay.
Right. I love your energy. I love it. It's very rare that I find someone who has similar thought patterns as I, because yes, this sucks.
Yeah.
Okay, you're minding your business and then your body is just doing whatever it's doing. It's it's an unfortunate situation. We gotta cope and we gotta deal. So I really like how your thought process is trying to continue to live, because we're still here. Yeah. Okay, so we gotta figure this out sometime.
My favorite quote that I've said to people recently is, just because you've been given a cactus doesn't mean you have to sit on it.
I love that.
And then in a slightly more serious note, and again bringing back the advocacy thing, Michael J. Fox talks about, he talks about acceptance, and he says as well, it's, it doesn't mean giving in, it's not surrender, it's just it is what it is, and there's got and then find a way through it. So it's that thing of like just saying to people, look, there are ways through it, there is a path through this. I know you feel as if you're in this horrible cave just now, but look, there's, there are things you can do. There's, there is hope, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train.
True. It's true. Like I said, I think a lot of people process illness, chronic condition, whatever term you want to say, they process it differently. Sometimes some people get right, get it right,
Mm-hmm.
or get right back on the horse, if you will, quickly. Okay, boom, this is what I got to do. Okay, blah, blah, blah. And then some people soak in it, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and kind of get lost because it can be overwhelming
Of
because
course.
what's happening? Okay,
Yeah.
it's a lot to process. So I totally get it. Now, how, okay, how did your wellness journey open up the door for the butterfly room? Because I think this is a beautiful thing that you have going on over there. Tell us about it and what it
Yeah.
entails.
So, as we said, I kind of went down a more holistic route. I was kind of guided down that path of, mindset work and meditation and holistic therapies, working with things like essential oils and crystals and all of that stuff. So I was guided, and then, but the thing is, I was referred to it through the NHS. Not
Okay.
not everyone gets that, you know. So for me, the butterfly room came about because the things that had helped me, I wanted to make accessible and affordable for other people. I wanted to share that, just share these things, because they shouldn't be expensive to access.
Right.
So it started with meditation classes in a local hall. Then it came to wanting to have my own space. I'm now, one of my friends opened a beautiful creative hub in the centre of the town where I live, and invited me to be part of it. So I work out of there now. But it's just, as I say, it's about helping people build their own toolboxes, helping people, chronic illnesses, the wider community, whatever, just to look at their well-being and look at what they can do themselves. As you say, we're so conditioned, to go to, if we're unwell, or to go to the doctor, and there's so much that we can do ourselves.
Right.
And it's just about kind of empowering people to do what they can to look after themselves.
Totally. It okay. So give me like an example. I know you have like different areas that you go into. You mentioned the crystals, you mentioned meditation. So if a patient wanted to use your service, right? And they're like, okay, Amanda, I'm stressed about this situation. Okay, what is one thing you start your conversation with?
The first thing we say is, do you know what? I get that you're stressed. Breathe. And let them kind of tell me their journey. And sometimes just having someone to get it out to can be the start. But then it's right, okay, listen to them. What do you need? Like I said about when I do the body scan, or when I go into like kind of some mindfulness stuff, it's about, okay, what does my body need? So we're all individuals. So I would have to sit with a client and say, okay, so you're telling me maybe you're not sleeping, so then maybe look at some things where, different techniques you can do before bed, or is it techniques because you're in pain? So it's kind of looking at, it's very individual.
Right.
And that's the way it should be. There is no one size fits all. Even with, I could have 5 clients all with fibromyalgia, but each client's needs and hopes for whatever they're looking, what they're looking for could be completely different. And I'm sure with myeloma it's the same. There are similarities, but then there's differences in what people want to focus on in their journey.
It is. It's funny because as you mentioned, one size, there's so many different sizes. Okay. So just as I mentioned, sometimes we're not going to get this script, unfortunately, from our doctors. So how important do you think it is in terms of whether it's the meditation? I know my area of field, exercise. How important is exercise? How important is the mental capacity to cope? And that can vary for a lot of people.
Yeah, of course.
So how important is to kind of grasp everything and to divvy with a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And on top of that, I know this is a couple of questions all grouped together, but having your GP, your general practitioner, on board with all of these different components to be happy, because that's kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, taking the GP out the picture, because for me, because I'm kind of doing so much in terms of self-management, I don't go to them now. It's a case of, because the things like the meditation and that, they're not kind of regularly offered. So now it's kind of my own, it's about kind of taking responsibility, I suppose, to a certain extent of, it's my journey, it's my well-being. I need to put the work in. And especially because I offer these services to clients, I have to walk the talk.
Right.
For me, it has to be, I can't do, it has to be do as I do, not do as I say.
Right.
So I have to be working on this stuff as well. It's like, yeah, I've got the certificates, and yes, I've read all the books, and I've done all the courses, but for me, it's the lived experience that makes it more valid and more important for the clients that come, because it's like, I'm not just, sitting behind a desk in a shiny white coat. It's like I've been, to a certain extent, I've been on the path they're on. I've been in that hole, I've been in that cave. And that's the thing. Sometimes that's enough for people, just to know that the person on the other side has been where they are.
Right. I totally agree. I think this whole roller coaster and finding those who are like-minded, if you will, it's all about lived experiences. Just as what you do, just as what I do, like with exercises, I try to show, like on social media, me actually doing exercises, especially jump rope. That's something I enjoy doing. However, and I always tell people, what I do may not necessarily be what you will do, and especially with multiple myeloma, that's a condition that has different variables of what it does. Usually a lot of people may have certain lesions or lytic lesions on their spine or their hip. So me jumping rope may not necessarily be something that you can do, but then there's a modified version of something you could possibly do. But as you say, me telling you whatever is different from me showing you. So me showing you that this is what I do may not necessarily be something that you do, but maybe there's a variance, or something similar that you can like bring in, or what have you. So that's important. I think that whole lived experience is important in terms of our advocacy. For sure. So again, I want to be mindful of the time, okay, because I know there's a huge difference, because usually our conversations can kind of go long.
We can keep it going. It's okay. We can keep it going. Honestly, I'm fine.
You're fine. Okay, so what is 2 things you've learned about yourself being diagnosed? That is surprising to you in terms of strength?
I think in terms of strength, two things I have done for fibromyalgia awareness. I have ziplined over the River Clyde. So the Clyde is a river that runs through Glasgow. I have zip lines from 100 feet up in the air down to the side of the river. And so that was about 3 years. That was about 2 years ago. Last year, I abseiled. Now, I don't like heights, so the 100 feet up for the zip line felt a big enough challenge. Right. Then the Fibromyalgia charity, who I do a lot of stuff with, we're looking for people to abseil off the Forth Bridge, which is a very famous, iconic Scottish landmark. Okay. It's also 165 feet tall.
Wow. Look at you.
So I abseiled from that down to, for the charity. So just, I think it's things like, I think that's what I've learned is like, as I said, the Amanda who was first diagnosed would have, and who lost the career and all the rest of it. It's just that life goes on. It might be different, but there has been so much that I had this conversation the other week. I was doing I do a volunteer as a radio presenter with a local community station, and we were having a Fibromyalgia Awareness Day special, and we were talking on that, and it's the thing of like, I can't wish it away, because there are, like, I wouldn't go back and not have it now, because there are things I've done, there are people I've met, there's experiences I have had that would never have been part of my life but for the fibromyalgia. And that's not toxic positivity. I hate toxic positivity. I hate the whole smiley, wonderful, rose-tinted glasses. That's not it. I have my down days, I have my struggles, but it's just that thing of like, there are things I've done and things I have achieved and experienced that wouldn't have happened without. So it's like, I'm very much a glass half full rather than, or even just there is a glass and I choose what goes in it to a certain extent,
right.
Rather, it's like the whole looking for the silver linings, looking for the glimmers, putting the focus on, not denying the bad, but keeping the focus on the good, and just knowing that that's possible and that there is good there. I think is the thing I've learned, that there is something good in every day.
Right. It's funny because, no matter what your faith is, your religious faith and all of that, sometimes I feel that God, again, whatever your faith, gives you these things that you may not necessarily want it that way, but you needed that awareness, if that makes any sense, within that. Because as you speak about climbing these huge things that you're doing over there, okay, and just doing all of these different things, I think of things as well, like me starting a vodcast, doing public speaking, absolutely not. And I've said this in many platforms that I've spoken at. Yeah, this wasn't me some years, like me doing this. I'm the person who puts in the work, does what she has to do, but I'm quite fine over there behind the curtain. Okay, doing what I gotta do. And reminding you that I help you do whatever, let's not get it twisted. However, I'm fine not being out like what we're doing right now. Okay. So it's just funny how we get to these points of our lives, however our lives kind of turn, this turn not the way we wanted to turn it. The story may go from the ending to the beginning versus the beginning. And it's just funny how it's like a crapshoot, if you will, of how it's gonna go. You think it's gonna go one way, and it's enlightening as to and then part of the enlightening is hmm, I had all of this in me to do all of these different, like, hidden talents that may have been wasted, like, okay, now if you gave me another way of going about it versus a diagnosis, that would have been a little better. But
Yeah.
but it's gonna be what it's gonna be. So that's interesting. So where can the viewers find out more about the Butterfly Room?
Um,
What's your website?
So the easiest way is if you just Google or in your search engine the Butterfly Room Paisley, you'll find your way to me. Obviously, people are watching this, so they can just grab the socials on there. And also, I self-published a book last year, How I Became a Butterfly.
I love it.
That is available via Amazon.
Okay.
And if you have I believe it's the Kindle Unlimited, what is in the UK, I presume that's it. Yeah, then the book's available free.
Okay.
It's part of your package, so.
Good. I'm a fellow author as well with a project that I just completed. So
Awesome.
Very nice. So Amanda, this has been very lovely. Again, I can usually go on and on. However, what parting words would you like to tell those who are newly diagnosed with fibromyalgia?
I suppose, hold on. I know it sucks. Keep hope. There is a path. That would be it. Just trust that there's a path.
Powerful words. Powerful words. Hope and trust the process.
Yeah.
That's not easy because some people, again,
it's not
very different.
It's not easy, but I can kind of say from my own journey, it's worth it. If you can, if you can find the new path, it is worth it. It takes work. It's an ongoing process. I'm not sugarcoating it. There are tough days, but the good far outweighs the bad.
Definitely. This has been so lovely, and it's been really it was great to meet you, Amanda.
You too.
Your story is very uplifting. That's what is very important, with no better time than the present, to have a platform for a variety of advocates to tell their story. And yours is up there of hope. You've said some very powerful words in the short time that we've, been on this live or whatever. And I think those who come back to listen later will really appreciate that. Sometimes, again, lived experiences. Sometimes we need people who are going through similar situations to have voice versus an expert, what I mean, a medical person or whatever. No, a patient lived experience is very important in this type of club that nobody really wants to be part of. So I'm going to end this here. For those who come on later, our replay will be up in a couple of days. I'll try to have this out shortly, Amanda. I'll send you a side note when it's up. This was a very powerful conversation. So for those who come on, I hope you guys get something out of it. You know, those who came on came off. Everyone is appreciated, so we appreciate that. Don't forget, guys, to follow us on YouTube. I know I sound like a broken record, but that's something we gotta do. Okay, we're trying to like get to 100 followers. Okay, so I need participation, everyone. Okay, but again, Amanda, thank you so much for your time this very, very late morning or early morning.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to come on and for letting me share your platform with you today. It's been lovely.
No problem. Thank you so much for accepting. So I really appreciate it. So go get some rest.
Yes, I'm off to bed.
And we'll be in touch.
Take care.